Good afternoon and welcome again to this webinar on the Crossrail performance assurance process. So to start, just a little bit about me. My name is Richard Wood. I'm the Associate Director working for Turner & Townsend as part of the Programme Partner here at Crossrail, and I'm the current Head of Performance Assurance and Commercial Assurance at Crossrail. I started my career in 2007 after I graduated from the University of Reading with a degree in Construction Management and Surveying. I then joined Turner & Townsend's graduate programme in September 2007. Where I initially worked within the health team on various hospital projects as a graduate cost manager. A year later, I joined the aviation division, where I worked on the Terminal 4 refurbishment programme. I worked there for 2 years, which included leading the commercial closeout. I then moved across to the Terminal 2 redevelopment programme, where I became cost and commercial lead for the information and control systems project. 18 months later, I became the lead of Turner & Townsend's managed service for this project, which included cost, commercial, risk, planning, change management and document control. I helped establish the commercial closeout process for the programme before helping to establish Heathrow's Q6 process. In August 2014 I joined Crossrail, so I've been on the programme now for just over 2 years, and my current role, as I mentioned, is Performance Assurance and Commercial Assurance Manager. I've also coordinated the completion of the programme controls element of the Learning Legacy programme. For those that have been present at the previous webinars, you'll be aware that there are 12 Learning Legacy themes which are organised by function. These are based around the themes identified by the London 2012 Learning Legacy programme and have been further developed in consultation with our partners. The Crossrail Learning Legacy website is organised around these themes, and I really would encourage you all to take a look if you haven't already done so. I believe it's an excellent resource. For those that have utilised it, a new wave of material has recently been released, so it's worth going back. Also, please do let us know your feedback. We're keen to make sure it's as useful as possible for you all. Programme controls falls under the theme of project and programme management highlighted in the top left-hand corner. So today's topic on the Crossrail supply chain performance assurance model is the latest in our series of webinars with the APM, and a lot of the content I'll be discussing today is held on the Learning Legacy website. So the objective and structure for today. So the objective is to provide an overview of the Crossrail performance assurance process, how it has proven a key tool to aid collaboration, sharing of knowledge and performance improvement across the supply chain. I'll start by giving an overview of the Crossrail programme, as my colleagues have done on previous webinars, and this is particularly really useful context for this presentation. I'll then run through the performance assurance process, the results, benefits, some of the example outputs, before concluding with looking at the wider industry engagement and some of the critical success factors before handing back to Jess to take us through the Q&A section. So what is Crossrail? Crossrail is among the most significant infrastructure projects ever undertaken in the UK. It really changed the way people travel around London, will improve journey times across London and ease congestion and offer better connections. Crossrail has a funding envelope of £14.8 billion, and it will transform rail transport in London, the South East, increase central London rail capacity by 10%, supporting regeneration and cutting journey times across the city. The Crossrail route will run over 100 kilometres from Reading and Heathrow in the west, through 42 kilometres of new tunnels under central London to Shenfield and Abbey Wood in the east. The blue lines on this map indicate works delivered by Network Rail, who are upgrading the existing routes to take Crossrail trains. The pink sections show the new tunnelled section under London. There will be 40 Crossrail stations, including 10 new stations at Paddington, Bond Street, Tottenham Court Road, Farringdon, Liverpool Street, Whitechapel, Canary Wharf, Custom House, Woolwich and Abbey Wood. Crossrail will bring an extra 1.5 million people within 45 minutes of central London and will link London's key employment, leisure and business districts together. Heathrow, West End, the City and the Docklands, which enable further economic development. It is estimated that Crossrail will support regeneration across the capital and add an estimated £42 billion to the economy of the UK. First Crossrail services through central London will start in late 2018, and an estimated 200 million annual passenger journeys will be undertaken on Crossrail. In terms of current construction, Crossrail is still Europe's largest construction project currently on site, and work started in May 2009. And at peak, there were over 10,000 people working over 40 construction sites, and over 100 million working hours have been completed on Crossrail so far. 8 tunnel boring machines were used to construct the 42 kilometres of new tunnels under London, and this work completed in May last year. And work to fit out the new stations, as well as fitting out the tunnels with railway systems, is well underway. As a programme, we are now 78% complete. I mentioned the Crossrail improved connections, and the graphic at the bottom of this slide shows how Crossrail will link into the existing Network Rail and London Underground infrastructure. It also serves to demonstrate the complexity of the interfaces on the programme. Although we're a London-based programme, the impact on supply chains across the UK has been very wide-reaching. Over the course of the project, we expect there to be at least 75,000 opportunities for businesses, generating enough work to support the equivalent of 55,000 full-time jobs. It's not just London and South East that will benefit from Crossrail. Firms right across the country of all sizes are winning business for Crossrail. 95% of contracts have been awarded to companies based in the UK, and 61% of these are outside of London. 58% are small and medium-sized businesses, and interestingly, 44% of these SMEs said they have made new contacts because of their work on Crossrail. Crossrail also has a very strong skills and legacy agenda. Crossrail has already exceeded its target of creating 400 apprenticeships, with over 500 being created on the project to date. The Tunnelling and Underground Construction Academy, TUCA, shown in the graphic at the top of this slide, is a purpose-built training facility that supports key skills required to work in tunnel excavation, underground construction and infrastructure. This was established at the outset of the project, as there was a shortage of tunnelling skills and capability within the UK at the time, as many of these skills have been lost overseas following completion of projects such as the Channel Tunnel and Jubilee Line extension. Crossrail recognised this as a strategic risk and also acknowledged the wider benefit to future programmes such as HS2 and Thames Tidal Tunnel, that will also be requiring special in tunnelling expertise. So by building and establishing TUCA, Crossrail is contributing to the development of new qualifications and health and safety standards across the industry. Crossrail also established a job brokerage service in partnership with Job Centre Plus in March 2010. This ensured that new job opportunities were efficiently advertised and that candidates with relevant skills can quickly be identified for new roles. By January of this year, Crossrail had created 4,443 new jobs, of which 95% were filled by local people and 21% of whom were previously unemployed. In terms of sustainability, minimising energy consumption during construction and operational life of Crossrail has always been a key focus for the project. Protection of the physical environment is another core component of Crossrail's sustainability strategy. Probably the most tangible benefit has been through the relationship we established with the RSPB to put the 3.4 million tonnes of spoil from our tunnelling operations back into beneficial reuse through the construction of a 1,500-acre new bird sanctuary in the Thames estuary, which was officially completed last July with 98% of excavated material recycled. In terms of tunnelling, so as I mentioned, for just over 3 years, 8 tunnel boring machines completed the tunnel construction under London for 42 kilometres of new rail tunnels, and these completed in May last year. Crossrail's tunnelling programme was calculated around a long average of around 100 metres of tunnelling progress per week, and our fastest day of tunnelling by a single machine was 72 metres by Ellie on the 16th of April 2014 between Pudding Mill Lane and Stepney Green. On average, Crossrail tunnelling progressed at a collective average of 38 metres per day. In terms of the stations, this slide really does emphasise the scale and complexity of what we're trying to achieve at Crossrail. For those who are familiar with London, this map shows Finsbury Circus. And under Finsbury Circus, the Circle Line connects Liverpool Street Station with Moorgate, the Central Line passes through Liverpool Street, and the Northern Line passes through Moorgate. This also acts as the terminus for First Capital Connect trains, and there is also an old post office railway tunnel which passes through the area. You can see the blue on this map is the Crossrail station, which is overlaid on top of this existing infrastructure. And as you can see, the scale is truly impressive, as well as the complexity of building around and connecting into the existing infrastructure. And at the end of the project, we need to put it all back as if we were never there. In terms of operations, Mass Transit Railway will be the operator of Crossrail trains, and they are already operating the London Overground as well as railways in Hong Kong, Melbourne and Stockholm. They have taken over operations of the old Abellio rolling stock between Shenfield and Liverpool Street under the TfL Rail brand as part of the lead up to Crossrail operations. In May 2017, the first new trains went to passenger service on this line between Liverpool Street and Shenfield. TfL rail services will open between Paddington and Heathrow in May 2018, replacing the existing Heathrow Connect service, and in December 2018, Crossrail becomes the Elizabeth line, which opens between Paddington, Abbey Wood, Liverpool Street and Shenfield, and Paddington to Heathrow T4. And by the time we get to December 19, the Elizabeth line will be fully open. Crossrail is a fully funded programme, and I mentioned the overall funding envelope of around 14.8 billion, and this slide shows the breakdown of where this 14.8 billion comes from, with the lion's share being the DfT and TfL. There is a very real culture on Crossrail, but with all this public money, we need to be constantly able to demonstrate value for money. This has and will remain a very high priority until we complete. Crossrail Limited, which was established in 2001, is the company that has been set up to build the new railway that will become known as the Elizabeth Line when it opens through central London in 2018. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of TfL and is jointly sponsored by TfL and DfT. Once the railway is complete, it will be handed over to TfL and run as part of London's integrated transport network. Crossrail Limited will establish a strong vision, which in summary is to safely deliver a world-class railway on time within our funding envelope, setting the bar for future major projects and programmes and leaving a legacy of improved performance within the UK infrastructure sector. Underpinning this overall vision, there are 4 key objectives, which are we safe, are we on time, are we within funding, and are we world class? This is important context when we get stuck into the performance assurance model in a few moments' time. Everything Crossrail does, everything we report, all decisions which are made can all be linked back to one or more of these 4 simple questions, these 4 objectives. So moving on to the main purpose of today's webinar, the Crossrail performance assurance model, which through collaboration has proven a key tool in developing supply chain capability and improving performance on the programme. So what is performance assurance? Performance assurance is a structural framework which enables us to objectively assess and benchmark supply chain's performance across the Crossrail programme. It was set up in 2012 following a challenge from the Executive Board, where it was seen that the supply chain were performing in line with the contractual requirements but were not outperforming to levels to enable our strategic objectives of being a world-class programme, setting the bar for future major projects and programmes and leaving a legacy of improved performance in the infrastructure industry to be met. The challenge was therefore to develop a process to enable cross-programme collaboration, to build capability in the supply chain to enable this outperformance. We built upon the early success we have with our commercial assurance process and rolled out the concept of analysing leading and lagging indicators across 5 other key delivery areas: health and safety, quality, environment, community relations and social sustainability to form the performance assurance framework. We'll come back to leading and lagging indicators shortly. The 6 areas of the framework are aligned to our objectives of are we safe, are we on time, are we within funding and are we world class. So the overall objectives of the process were to support contractor performance improvement, provide an objective assessment of performance, facilitate innovation and sharing of good practice across the programme, create wider industry opportunity for our supply chain by enabling our top performers to differentiate themselves, and drive greater collaboration between projects and with the central functional teams. This was with the overall vision of moving industry forwards through demonstrating world-class performance levels that set the bar for other major projects and programmes, and in doing so, differentiated those responsible. So how does this approach work in practice? We worked with each of the functional teams initially to develop a detailed and objective measurement framework for each function. At this point, it's important to note that each of the 6 central functions already existed within the Crossrail organisation, and each were undertaking some level of audit and assurance on the supply chain. So through this process, we were able to standardise the approach to assurance and provide a common scoring methodology to enable us to pull the performance information together. In terms of the scoring methodology, each function measured performance objectively using a scale of 0 to 3, 0 being non-compliance with the requirements of the contract, 1 being compliance with the contract, 2 being value-added performance, and 3 being world-class. Each functional framework also analyses both inputs and outputs, or leading and lagging indicators. Leading indicators are qualitative and relate to the approach to delivery, processes, procedures, management arrangements, resourcing, training programs, policies, etc., whereas lagging indicators are quantitative and indicate the effectiveness of this approach, so traditional KPIs. An example I was used to bring this concept to life is the preparation of a periodic cash flow forecast. So the more mature the input processes are, so for example, if the forecast is developed using information from key sector suppliers, if it's aligned to the works programme, if it includes a modelled risk forecast, if it undergoes a robust assurance process, etc., then the more accurate you would expect that forecast to be. Another example could be with regards to health and safety, where the stronger the health and safety culture is on site in terms of the processes, policies and management arrangements, the lower you would expect the accident frequency rate to be. Measuring both the inputs and outputs enables us to plot our supply chain's performance across 2 axes on a chart like this. And this gives us much more intelligent information than if just traditional quantitative KPIs we use. If, for example, we consider a contractor whose performance falls into the bottom right of this chart. In this case, the contractor is achieving good quantitative outputs, but the input and process maturity is low. In this case, if traditional KPIs were just used, you could see this contractor as a top performing, as the outputs are so high. But through this model, we're able to identify a future performance risk as the process maturity is low. It could be seen that this contractor has just been lucky to date, or the project is at a relatively simple stage. and we would expect performance to decline if the complexity increases or if a significant change is introduced. Conversely, if we consider a contractor whose performance falls into the top left of the chart, in this case the contractor has very mature input processes, but the quantitative outputs are not yet compliant. In this case, if traditional quantitative KPIs were used, the contractor could be the focus of intense management intervention, audit and assurance. Whereas through this model, we've been able to predict that the performance of this contractor would increase as the input processes start to bear fruit. This is important as management effort could be wasted on a contractor whose performance would naturally increase regardless. These are two extreme examples used to illustrate a point, and by design we've linked the inputs and outputs so we can identify the specific input processes which are driving better outcomes in order that these can be captured and shared across the program. So the intent, therefore, is that we can help improve the input capability of lower performing contracts through collaboration and knowledge sharing, which would derive better performance over time. How do we gather data? The performance assurance process is undertaken once every 6 months to a year, depending on how summer and Christmas holidays fall. And at the start of the process, we open what is called an assessment window, which runs for 4 periods as indicated in the timeline on this slide. Ahead of the assessment window, we issue the measurement framework to the contractors who will be assessed in order that requirements are clearly understood and to allow the appropriate preparation for the input maturity reviews. In terms of the output metrics, we simply take a representative sample of the data which is required to be reported periodically under the contract, covering the 4 periods of the assessment window. We then simply relate this data to our scale of 0 to 3 to ascertain the output performance level. So in this respect, supply chain noticed no difference to the normal periodic reporting process. The only difference occurs with regards to the input maturity assessment, which is undertaken by each of the functional teams with each contractor somewhere within the 4-period assessment window. The maturity assessments are undertaken using the objective measurement framework to ascertain which processes are in place and to what level of maturity. Following these reviews, the functional teams complete a feedback report in a standard format, which is submitted into the central performance assurance team to review and collate into a single feedback document for each contractor. These reports detail the specific observations from the reviews, the input and output performance levels, suggested improvement actions to resolve non-compliances, as well as to achieve value-added and world-class performance levels. An example of this report in a few slides' time. Once the reports are compiled and agreed with the project managers, they are released to the contractors, who are then invited to participate in collaborative feedback sessions with the functional teams to prioritise and implement the improvement actions. The Central Performance Assurance team then undertake analysis of the performance data in preparation of the presentation of the results to various forums such as the Executive Board, the Audit Committee, Project Managers Forum, Contractors Forum and other specific functional sessions. So what have been the results? As mentioned, the process was implemented in 2012 when we undertook our first round of assessments, and as can be seen, the perception that performance was in line with the contract requirements proved true. As you can see, that the collective performance average fell on the indicative contractual compliance line. And in the absence of a framework which defined what our performance looked like, this is what could be expected. Since the first round, we have seen significant and sustained improvement in both input and output performance, particularly between rounds 1 and 3. The process has been running for 4 years now, and our latest round of performance assurance results, round 6, represents a 48% improvement since inception. The green point in the top right-hand corner of this chart is also interesting. This indicates our best collective score. So this is if we were to collate our top performing contracts with regards to health, safety, commercial, quality, environment, etc., and collate them into the dream contractor. This is where the performance level could be. And this is important as this level of performance exists on the program, so we don't need to innovate to get to this performance level. We simply need to be more effective in the way in which we capture and share knowledge across the program. The previous chart showed how the collective average score has changed over time, whereas this chart shows our round 6 results by contractor. It is here where you can see the benefit of identifying the top performing contracts and using them to share knowledge with lower performers. You can see that there's a mixture of maturity in here, and the grey diamonds represent contracts which were assessed for the first time in round 6. You can see that these are generally less mature, and they are still in the mobilisation phase and are still developing processes and procedures. What we've seen generally, however, is that these contracts will be the most improved by the next assessments. You can also clearly see the correlation between input and output maturity performance here. At this point, it's also worth emphasising the process was established post-contract, and there is no obligation on our contractors to take part. It is therefore crucial that we clearly articulate the purpose and benefits of the process to the supply chain, and the fact that it exists to help them improve their capability and outperform their requirements in an efficient and effective manner. One of the ways we do this is to correlate our performance assurance scores to our value metrics. You can see here that the average cost and schedule performance of our top performing contract is approximately 10% better than the average of the rest. We've been able to draw the same conclusion in every round of the performance assurance process so far. So this helps prove the concept, and if our contractors engage in the process, strive for improvements in the context of the framework, this translates to more efficient delivery in terms of cost and schedule, which has indirect gains through the target cost mechanisms within the contract. What about if we look at performance trends by function? This chart here shows the improvement in performance scores by function between round 1 and our latest set of results. You can see that there has been significant gains across the board, including an 81% improvement in health and safety performance, a 65% increase in environmental performance, 46% in terms of quality, and so on. We've also been able to correlate performance assurance scores to other measures of delivery efficiency, with our top performing contracts shown to be safer, with fewer defects, and also being more predictable in terms of the outturn cost and periodic cost forecast. So there has been significant improvement, but how specifically have we achieved these results? Well, firstly, and probably most importantly, we've been able to identify the specific input processes which are driving the better outcomes through the process, which we have then captured and shared across the functional teams. This has enabled a much more targeted approach to knowledge sharing across the program on a process-by-process basis. This has helped greatly improve collaboration between projects and also served to create collaborative links between the central functions and the project teams. The process has also allowed us to manage our own resourcing intelligently, as we're able to identify when the process maturity is such that we can remove specialist resources from one project and reallocate them to another where the processes are not as mature. So a risk-based approach to resource management, which has helped us retain a lean client team. We have utilised the framework to set actions to reach our performance levels, and have also been able to promote the use of Crossrail's innovation platform, Innovate 18, where we've encouraged our contractors to publish best practice in innovation for wider dissemination. The functions have also been able to create hubs of knowledge and best practice, which can be shared both at the reviews themselves in order to agree to performance improvement actions, as well as between the assessment rounds. Finally, as a performance assurance team, we try to ensure a wide communication of results in order to increase competition and provide incentivisation for our contractors to outperform, as a wide publication of results helps with differentiation. This slide shows some of the example outputs of the process. You can see an example of the executive performance summary in the top left, which shows the performance levels by function, the movement in input and output performance levels between rounds, the functional performance trends, etc. The contractors also receive anonymised versions of the performance analysis charts at both the contract level and functional level, so they can see how they compare with the other contractors on the program. The graphic at the bottom shows an example page of the feedback report, which runs into approximately 45 pages, so that's a very detailed analysis. It shows the input and output performance levels for each theme within the functional frameworks, as well as what was observed in the reviews and the suggested improvement actions. We've also created electronic dashboards which can be accessed by project managers and functional teams and used to cut and carve and analyse the data in any way. The electronic dashboards also include an interactive station map where you can click into each station and it will bring up information about that project, the performance trends, and so on. In terms of wider communication, we always publish the results through Connecting Brief, which is Crossrail's weekly newsletter, which gets published to everyone working on the program. This really is in order to publicise the results as widely as possible. We've even worked with Construction News in the past to publish the results externally in order to help fulfil our promise of helping our top performing contractors differentiate themselves in the market, which in turn creates greater engagement in the process. So just to summarise the overall benefits. Performance assurance drives performance across the whole of the supply chain through providing a definition of frontier performance. It allows the intelligent management of a program or portfolio through rich performance data. Generates innovation throughout the supply chain, thereby supporting contractor delivery. Improves collaboration both on-site and across the client teams. Facilitates the sharing of good practice and connects centres of excellence. Provides a platform for our contractors to differentiate themselves on the global stage. And generates a legacy of improved performance. The success we've had with the Crossrail performance assurance model has naturally attracted quite a wide interest from across the industry. This slide here shows just some of the client organisations that we've shared the process with. As you can see, many of the large infrastructure client organisations are represented here. There are even some outside infrastructure, such as Shell. We've also engaged with professional bodies such as the APM and RSES, as well as external press like Construction News, as I mentioned. We're even working with the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, which is a unit within HMT, to help standardise the approach across the whole industry. So to summarise, one of the ways I thought we could summarise was to look at the critical success factors that we've established throughout this process. All of these critical success factors are within the micro report held on the Learning Legacy webpage, so please do go and take a look. I'll just pick out a few of them today. Firstly, and most importantly, I think collaboration is one of the key critical success factors. And that was both initially by working with the supply chain to define what the outperformance and world-class levels were, and then the performance thresholds, as well as between each of the assessment rounds to make sure that those performance thresholds are still valid. Secondly, alignment to objectives. We want to make sure that we're driving performance improvement in line with our corporate objectives, so we're driving performance in the right areas. Objectivity. So objectivity in the measures provides greater focus on the improvement actions rather than arguing around the integrity of the data. And finally, incentivization. So clear incentivization helps to improve performance, and whether that's financial reward or through brand enhancement. That's probably the latter example that we've utilised on Crossrail. So as a reminder, the Crossrail Learning Legacy site is up and running. It's well worth a look. There's lots of information on there. A new wave of material has just been released. Please do take a look and let us know your thoughts. There's one further webinar after today's session on commercial assurance, which I'll be running in November next month. If you would like any more information on the performance assurance process specifically, then please do feel free to make contact. I'll now hand back to Jess to take us through the Q&A section.
Thank you, Richard. First question. How do you manage consistency across the input assessments with different contractors and different Crossrail personnel conducting such reviews?
I think it's a good question. I think the process is quite mature now, so we've been running for 4 years, and I think all of the staff that are undertaking the reviews are quite well versed in the way that the reviews should be undertaken. I think that was more of a challenge in the early stages when the initial process was rolled out, and really it was down to my role, the performance assurance manager, to make sure that those assessments are being undertaken correctly, objectively, in the same consistent format. So it's something that we had to work with the functional teams through training and through attending reviews and through pilot testing the framework early on.
Thank you. Next question. Would the qualitative inputs for performance assurance be developed and shared alongside the contractor?
Yes, so as I mentioned, collaboration was a key part setting this framework up initially, and we held various workshops with the supply chain and all the contractors that are going to be involved in this process to establish what those qualitative input processes were. We were keen that we maintain that collaboration going forward as well throughout this process. So yeah, really the supply chain were heavily involved in developing those performance thresholds and what processes we would expect to see to enable that outperformance against the contract.
Thank you, Richard. Next question. Could you tell us more about the Connect centres and how they work?
Do you mean connecting the centres of excellence? Yeah, so this is, so as we undertake the assessments, we're able to identify specific input processes which are delivering better outcomes. And what we're able to do is to identify those areas, and throughout as we undertake the assessments, is to link those processes into other projects and other contractors that perhaps have less mature processes in those areas. So really it's down to the functional teams to connect to those centres of excellence throughout the process, and also between rounds as well, so to help our contractors meet the performance improvement actions. There'll be a level of collaboration after the reviews to share those good practices that we've observed.
How do you transfer best practices when many of those contractors' systems will be individual and may be commercially sensitive and confidential?
Yeah, I think it's another good question, and there certainly was some pushback early on throughout this process where the contractors were perhaps a little bit more adversarial by nature, possibly, in terms of wanting to share some of the good practices they've seen. I think they've recognised the benefit of the process, and it's a two-way street, isn't it? I mean, we're able to share knowledge from the wider programme to help them improve their capability, and all we ask in return is that they reciprocate that with any good practice that they've got. So really the process exists for the mutual benefit of all the contractors working on Crossrail, and what we want to do is to help them all leave Crossrail with better capability. So really sort of through the maturity of this process and through the approach, we've been able to break down those barriers as the contractors have seen the benefit of the approach.
Thank you. Next question. Do you think information security and collaboration are compatible?
Yeah, I think so. So in terms of information security, we're not asking our contractors to share anything that's commercially sensitive. We're not asking our contractors to perhaps share anything which is a key differentiator. What we're trying to do is just establish the specific input processes which are generally delivered by individuals on projects and sharing those across the program. So in that respect, I think it goes hand in hand with collaboration, really.
Thank you. As it wasn't an obligation, did you encounter any resistance or issues engaging suppliers in the process?
Certainly early doors, yeah. There's probably a little bit of a sense of we want me to outperform the contracts without paying me any more money to start with, which is a bit of a barrier that we needed to break down. And really it took quite a lot of effort from the central functional teams to work with the supply chain early on to articulate what the benefits of this process was going to be. Actually now we're quite mature in the process. Everybody's engaged in it. Everybody can see the benefit of it. We've got 14 out of 17 contracts which are now outperforming the requirements of the contract. So yeah, again, it was probably more challenging in that respect early on, but as we've been able to demonstrate the benefits of the process through things like the correlation with our delivery efficiency measures, we've been able to sort of bring the supply chain on the journey with us, and now they're pretty heavily engaged in the process.
Thank you. What stage was the most challenging in implementing this performance assurance process?
Certainly the initial setup. So there's quite a lot of work that went into, as I mentioned, to sell the benefits to the supply chain to get that initial engagement. And there's also quite a heavy workload in terms of undertaking all of the workshops to develop the objective frameworks, making sure that everything that we're measuring was objective, so that we don't spend time after the assessments arguing around the integrity of the data. We can instead focus on what the data is telling us and helping our contractors to improve their performance. So yeah, I mean the most challenging bit was definitely up front. It was a new model that was established at Crossrail. It hadn't been seen in the industry anywhere before. So really it was a case of testing the concept and articulating the benefits to make sure that we're bringing everybody along the journey with us.
Excellent. Next question. How did the cost of quality change with the improvement in performance, and how was this measured?
So through the quality team, each of the contractors are required to report on the cost of correcting defects. And what we're able to do through this process was to correlate our performance assurance scores versus the cost of these correction of these defects. And what we've seen is that our top performing contractors spend less in terms of the proportion of their monthly spend on the correction of defects. So that therefore tells you that the top performing contractors are achieving right first time quality more often.
How did you set your world-class standards?
I think, again, similar to some of the other questions we've had, the world-class standards were developed in collaboration with the supply chain. What I would say as well, that's not been a static benchmark. Obviously, that was the initial benchmark that was set 4 years ago. And what we do after each round of assessments is to have a dialogue with our supply chain to make sure that performance threshold is still where it needs to be. So it was initially developed in collaboration, and it's been maintained in collaboration as well.
Thank you. And did this process extend to design or just construction?
Just construction. We do have framework design contracts, and they are subject to a separate assurance process here at Crossrail. But what I would say is through the process, we do a level of assurance on the contractor-owned portion of the designs, and that falls within the quality section of the framework.
How does this process include specific site or contract constraints to enable the performance of contracts to be achieved and not biased?
Well, so I think, when we initially developed the frameworks, we distilled all of the requirements of the contract down into a simple set of performance levels, really. So I think even just by undertaking that process and collating all the requirements under the contract into one place proved beneficial for the supply chain. Because I mean, the contracts, as you can imagine, run into many pages. So the fact that we distilled all the requirements down into one place proved very beneficial. And those requirements are static, aren't they? So the only fluid element of the frameworks are the value-added and world-class performance levels, which we modify in collaboration with the supply chain. I think through the process as well, we're able to identify areas of the contracts where the contractors aren't perhaps meeting the base standards. So there's kind of two benefits of this approach. One is to make sure and help our contractors meet their obligations under the contract, as well as then the outperformance element of it.
Is there anything you would have done differently when setting up or implementing the process?
I'm not sure if there's anything that would need to be done differently. I think it's been an iterative process. I mean, as I mentioned, this process was an innovation here at Crossrail. It hadn't been done before, and it has grown in maturity over the 4 years since we implemented it. And over those 4 years, we've gradually built more and more objectivity into the measures. For example, we've been able to build more linkage between the input processes and the quantitative outputs. So really, I think if and when this process is implemented on other major infrastructure projects and programs, we've got the benefit of undertaking that journey over the last 4 years. So we'll be starting from a better position in terms of a better linkage between inputs and outputs and better objectivity. So not necessarily anything we'd do differently, but I think we've just experienced the iterative improvements of the process over time here.
Thank you. Has the process been applied to Crossrail's internal departments, and what are their results? For example, meeting obligations.
So from that question, I think the question has been asked around whether or not we undertake the assurance on the Crossrail project teams. The answer to that is no. This is a supply chain performance assurance model. But what we can do is to utilise the performance information that we do get to provide us with program management insight. So for example, if all of the projects across the program were struggling in one particular area, so it could be community relations, or it could be contract administration, or a particular functional area. If that is consistent across the program, that indicates then an external factor which is influencing that performance. So it could be something that the Crossrail organisation is doing or is not doing, or it could be an external factor. And what we're able to then do is to sort of correct that by additional guidance, additional training, development of additional metrics to get better management foresight.
That's great, thank you, Richard. And we have time for one more question. About the Connect centres, are they virtual centres where you use collaborative platforms, or do you meet in a physical space?
It's a bit of both, really. So the physical meetings take place throughout the performance assurance process itself. So when each of the functional specialists go down to each of the projects to undertake the maturity assessment, they go armed effectively with the best practice they've observed across the program and are able to give that to the project teams at that review. The second thing is an IT-enabled platform, so the Innovate 18 platform here at Crossrail. And when we see areas of innovation or best practice, we promote the use of the Innovate 18 platform to encourage our contractors to upload the best practice that they've got to that platform, which then gets shared across the program across the IT platform.